Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Failing is Not an Option, where we are not just things for the marriage and family therapy exam, but we can talk about like real life things. I always throw like something in there that I have done with my clients, done with some of my students that I work with at my school, and some of the times about my own family. So this week and last week, we've covered two of the most greatest models within the family therapy realm, strategic and structural family therapy. This week, we kind of told the lines with two, and I am just like giving an overview. We know that strategic and structural draws from one another, but they both draw from general systems theory. And I think that we kind of have that understanding. So I've been watching how everyone has been responding to some of the questions that I've been putting in the group. So let's just get started and look at these. Now, I know that a lot of people had said they had never heard of shaping competence before in structural therapy, and that's okay. That's why we're here learning, so that when you see it come up on the exam, you're going to know what it means if they're trying to like just throw that in there at you. So let's take a look at this first question. Which of the following best defines shaping competence in structural family therapy? Now, we know that shaping competence is doing what? We want to be able to look at the positive, the good. Don't pay attention to what's that negative and that bad that's going on. Let's look at some of the positive and the good that this family has been going through. And then we're going to gradually build on that new things that they've been doing that's good and it's helping the family system. So we look for an answer response that talks about just what I discussed. Now, however, on the exam, it might be a little bit tricky. They might be using some of them fancy terms or some of them fancy words. But as long as you have an understanding and a gist of what it means, you can locate that best answer. If we take a look at A, exploring family dynamics to increase insight. We know that in structural family therapy, it's not discussing like insight and increasing any insight. So we would automatically get rid of that answer response, right? C says analyzing the causes of a dysfunctional subsystem. Now, that one's kind of trying to throw you because it's got some of that structural family therapy language in it. But like I said, if you have a gist of what shaping competence mean, you will know that C is not the best answer. D says teaching communication skills to alter the family structure. There it is again, those fancy languages that come from structural family therapy. But if you take a look at B, we're having family members develop and practice those new interaction skills that they have, and we're doing it gradually, slowly shaping what they are now learning to work for the family system in order to reinforce some of those healthier patterns that is going on, making B your best answer. All I want us ultimately to do is have a gist of what a term mean, a phrase mean, and then take that and build on it. That is what I want each of us to be able to do when it comes to these questions. I am not perfect. Sometimes when I see a question and I'm just like, what is this question asking me right now? And it takes me some time. I'm not perfect. I'm good, but I'm not that damn good. Okay, I will say that. Alrighty. Which intervention is used in strategic therapy to disrupt a problematic sequence by altering how family members respond to one another? I remember this question being in the group this week, and so many people were kind of like different in the lines of how they viewed this question. Go back, look at this question. It's a strategic therapy question. Which intervention, so we're looking for an intervention, all of these are interventions, and it's hard, but if you know what each of the interventions mean, you'll be easier to find this answer. Which intervention is used to disrupt a problematic sequence by altering how the family members respond to one another? If you take a look at an enactment, it is an intervention, but is it an intervention for strategic therapy? It's not. Get rid of it. An ordeal, you know what an ordeal is. Less desirable, more desirable. Don't put the feelings in it and everything. If you know that that's what an ordeal is, you get rid of it. You know that a restraining technique is ultimately telling that family, that client, that couple, whoever the case may be, slow down, don't change right now. Why don't you just, you want to give up snacks all in all. Now, why don't you just kind of like reduce how many of them hot Funyuns that you've been eating? Talking about myself here, right? But if you know what that means, you know that all three of those has nothing to do with what this question is asking, leaving D to be the best one. It's a directive. telling somebody what to do. I want you to disrupt this problematic sequence. I'm telling you to go home and prescribe this symptom to yourself. Keep doing what you're ultimately coming to therapy to stop doing. It's a directive. That's all that means, right? Which of the following best defines a paradoxical intervention? We've beat a dead horse with this. If you don't know what a paradoxical intervention means by now, since you've been working with me, you and I need to meet privately, because I need to pick your brain a little bit more. I've beat it in the ground. We beat this in the ground. This is going to be a question when you see on the exam. You're going to be like, well, Carrie said, pick that answer and keep on going, give it to God and move on. Okay, that's what I'm on. Assigning a client to increase the frequency of a symptomatic behavior to gain control over it. That's what a paradoxical intervention is. B says encouraging a client to give up the symptom. Well, yes, that's what a paradoxical intervention ultimately does, but it's asking you to define a paradoxical intervention, right? We need to understand what these questions are asking us. C says identifying the root causes of the client's problem. No, it ain't. C is wrong. D says creating an alliance with only one family member. Okay, no, it ain't. No. We're not going to entertain it tonight because we know what a paradoxical intervention is, okay? In structural family therapy, when a therapist positions themselves with a particular family member or a subsystem to shift the power dynamics, what is this called? We've talked about this as well. This is also not just in structural family therapy, but it's also in strategic family therapy. I can tell you one thing. I know what it ain't. It ain't a reframe, because we know a reframe does what? Something negative to a positive, but we're looking at it in a different way. Same fact, same thing, just looking at it in a different way, right? We know an enactment is role playing. You had a fight last night. Okay, show me how you fought last night. I want to know what y'all said to each other. I want to know how you all talk to each other. We know it's not that. And you know joining is doing what? Building rapport with the family, being accepted by the family by saying, doing whatever it is the family is doing in order for them to have the trust with you. So we know that this answer is unbalancing. Unbalancing is about a shift in the power dynamics within the family. If it's unbalanced, unbalancing is going to balance it. You got a mother and a father. You got a mom that's disciplined. You got a father that's passive, doesn't care, comes and goes when he wants, but the mom is left there trying to raise the kids and do everything. So now we need to shift some power dynamics. This father needs to be on the same page that this mother is on. So what is that therapist going to do ultimately? That therapist is going to be like, okay, well, hey, you know what? You sitting over there all by yourself, Dad, because I'm going to be with this mom right now, and you need to get on the same page with us. It can be viewed in many different ways. There's many different ways that you can view unbalancing, okay? Alrighty, so we've also had some fill in the blanks this week. Shout out to Marie for doing this. I appreciate you with your fill in the blanks for this week. The goal of structural therapy is to change the family's underlying what? By altering their interaction patterns and strengthening their what? Now, so fill in the blanks, I know a lot of people try to avoid. You don't want to think. But ultimately, you do have to think. If you can fill in some of these blanks, you can answer any of those questions, even by reading some of those answer responses, and it's going to sound so much better to you. The goal of structured family therapy is to change the family's underlying what? We need to change that organization. We need to alter some of those boundaries, alter those hierarchies, by strengthening, and that's going to strengthen what? We're going to have to strengthen that hierarchy when we do that. We're going to strengthen some of those boundaries that are just like out of place with each other, right? So a structural therapist might use what to encourage family members to act out their dysfunctional patterns? Enactments, role playing. That's what a structural family therapist is going to do. The primary goal of strategic family therapy is to change the family's what? That is maintaining the problems. We got to change some of those families' interactions, some of those sequences, because it's maintaining that problem, right? So we beat this into the ground. We beat it like a dead horse. I know y'all tired of hearing me saying it. I know you probably tired of hearing it, but that's okay because you will never forget it. Strategic therapists believe that symptom serves a purpose, right? It serves a purpose because it has a function within the family system. There's a reason as to why that function exists. It's doing something to that system, even if they don't realize it, right? That's what strategic therapy is all about, looking at those interactions, those patterns, but that therapist has to disrupt it because that family has a faulty system. It has a disorganized system. Same way with structural family therapy. That therapist is going to observe those interactions, watch those interactions, may mimic it, but then ultimately we need to alter it because the kid is here and the parents are there, and it needs to be vice versa. We've got some enmeshment going on, and we need to have some what? We got to have some more clear boundaries in place, right? This is like there are two differences between strategic therapy and structured therapy. Right there is what I just did, okay? Now, we've got some scenarios here, and I also have some breadcrumbs here for us to go through them together. We are going to treat these questions as if we are taking the MFT national exam, and we're going to use some of these systems that I want you to use when you do take the exam, such as using the highlighting feature and the strikeout feature in order to navigate these questions to lead you to your best answer. Okay, let's take a dive. A structural family therapist, Alex, is meeting with the Johnson family for the first time. Alex notices that Mary and Ethan speak in hushed tones and frequently exchange knowing glances, while David sits on the opposite side of the room looking disengaged. Alex deliberately moves their chair closer to David and begins asking him about his week. So without even looking at those answer responses, we've got a system here that seems to be a little bit out of whack, right? So we got to get some balance back. That is how I want us to start conceptualizing these questions right before you even look at those answers. And if you can do that, you're going to know exactly which answer response you need to be looking for. Because if you take a look, the question is, this intervention is best describing an example of what? Let's take a look at some of these breadcrumbs. But feel free to pause this video and find this answer before I reveal what the best answer is. Now, I've highlighted some of what's important that's going to lead us to our best answer. So it's the first time meeting them, right? Right. So we have speaking in hushed tones, Mary and Ethan, but we have Alex. Alex is a therapist, right? Mary and Ethan, what are they like? The mother and a son, and then David's sitting all by himself, but they got these little cues that they're using with each other, glancing over at each other, and David's just sitting over there looking like a lame in a corner. So at least if he's gonna be lame, let him be part of the family system, right? So the intervention that's best described is an example of what? I don't know why joining and accommodating is highlighted. I think it's the I want to say, or did I highlight that? No, I think I highlighted that. So I did that because, yes, this was ultimately like a first question. So it's the first time meeting. And I didn't want people to be thrown because they said it's the first time that they're meeting each other. Don't go looking at joining and accommodating because it's asking you the best intervention that is being described. Joining and accommodating is an intervention, but it's not the intervention that they are describing in this scenario. It's not boundary making because we know boundary making is doing what? Looking at some of those boundaries that are inappropriate and altering them, right? We know an enactment is a role play, so that leaves us to D, which is the unbalancing. The therapist ultimately moved this chair from away from everybody else and sat next to David because David was sitting over there like a lame. So now the therapist and David is two lames together, but at least you got some balance to the sentence, to the system. Is 2 against 2 right now. So yes, unbalancing is going to be your best answer, not joining and accommodating, even though this is a first session that is mentioned in the scenario. During the first session, a strategic therapist notices that the father dominates conversations while the mother remains silent. The therapist decides to observe and track who speaks, who interrupts, and how decisions are made. This activity serves what early phase purpose? Now, we're going to treat this like we're taking this test for real. We're going to conceptualize here just what we are hearing ourselves read as we read this scenario. It's a first session. And the therapist noticed that the father is dominating the conversation. The therapist is noticing. So that therapist has to be doing what? Observing what is going on. So we are going to know what answer response we are looking for before we even get to those answer responses. So pause the video, see if you can find the video before I find it. But let's take a look at these breadcrumbs, right? The father's dominating the conversation, mother remains silent. So right there we see that there's something, that's going on. The father thinks that he's he the man, so he knows it all. We know sometimes Jay Haley, like, with the man, the whole man thing, I just don't understand, but whatever. So, but the mother is just remaining silent, so we've observed that. But then the therapist is now observing and tracking what's going on with this family, how the decisions are made, and who interrupts who when they talk. This is an early phase activity that they're doing. We know teacher communication skills, that's the middle phase. That's the intervention that's done in the middle phase. Enforcing equal participation, strategic therapists don't really do that. I've never heard of them doing that. And correcting power imbalances, yes. Because ultimately, strategic therapist is all about the power dynamics that is going on in the family. But that doesn't happen in the early phase. Gathering data is what happens in the early phase. Because we know that in the early phase, you're going to do what? The social stage. You got the problem stage, the interaction stage, and then a goal setting stage. Those are your 4 stages that occur in the early phase of therapy, leaving A to be the best answer. All right, let's take a look at this one. A 42-year-old male, Michael, has been experiencing some intense anxiety, persistent insomnia, irritability, heart palpitations, frequent crying, loss of interest in his hobbies. He's got a lot that's going on here, right? He lives with his wife, Laura, and his teenage son, Ryan, who reports they often disagree about how to support him during these episodes. The family presents ultimately together for therapy for the very first time. Now, we are in a first session. This is a structural family therapy question, but don't be fooled. This is one of those questions where you need to pay attention to what this question is actually asking you. As a structural family therapist, what should be the first systemic intervention that you should do? Let's take a look at these breadcrumbs, right? So now here we have some, oh my God, I didn't do the breadcrumbs for these. Please excuse me. I'm a little bit off this weekend. So we've got some intense anxiety, some persistent insomnia, irritability, heart palpitations. That's all I highlighted. That's all I would highlight, frequent crying. The heart palpitations really is just like, I can't do anything with that, right? So A says to join with the family. I get it. It is a first question. I know a lot of people picked join with the family, provide psychoeducation to the family about anxiety and depression. But you can't do that first. You can't start to work with this family when we've got some medical issues that are going on that we can't touch. C says request a physician to prescribe some anti-anxiety medication. So now you just automatically just about to diagnose this client, then just about to ask for some medication? No, you can't do that. Develop a family-based schedule of activities to reduce symptoms. If you can stop heart palpitations with some family-based schedule activities, then sign me up for it, right? Because that's bonkers. Please, that's crazy. So if you take a look at B, refer Jason for a psychiatric evaluation, including assessment for medication, because he's got too much going on. I can't touch that. It makes no sense for me to sit there and be like, oh, tell me more about those heart palpitations. He's going to have a heart attack right in my therapy room. I don't think so. Go see a psychiatrist, go see a medical doctor or whatever. Remember, it's not always the correct answer. It's going to be the best answer that you need to be looking for, right? Alrighty. Oh dear God, I hope I have the breadcrumbs for this one. An MFT is working with a 37-year-old non-binary client, Taylor, who has a diagnosis of major depressive disorder. Taylor has previously experienced suicidal thoughts but has not attempted suicide. After a recent breakup, Taylor tells a therapist that his life feels unbearable and mentions having enough prescription medication. If I decide I can't handle it anymore, hey, I'm just gone, right? But during a session, Taylor expresses doubt about even making it through the weekend. Taylor's parents and older siblings have been heavily involved in daily life, frequently taking over his responsibilities and monitoring his safety. The therapist notices that the enmeshed family pattern may be reinforcing Taylor's dependence and his limited autonomy. Now, we've got a lot of stuff that's going on in that question, right? As a structural family therapist, what would be the most appropriate initial intervention that you are going to do? Pause this video. I'm hoping that you found the best answer before I reveal what the best answer is. But if you have been working with me, if you have been in a group, you know how to find this best answer. Okay, thank God I have the breadcrumbs. Alrighty, so if we take a look, we have major depressive disorder. Huge red flag that I do not ignore in any question that comes along, because I know that sometimes with major depressive disorder, they're going to try to have some suicidal ideation that is going to follow right with it. So I also went ahead, highlighted, he feels unbearable. He has enough medication where if he just wanted to end it all, he would just simply end it all. And then he also mentions that he might not be able to make it through the weekend. So we want to pay attention to that. Now, this question says, as a structural family therapist, what would be the most appropriate initial interaction? Now, I get it. We are going to turn our brains onto structural family therapy, but you also need to tie in the suicidal ideation that is also included within this question. There is a lot of fluff in this question. To be honest with you, the only piece that you needed to pay attention to was that he can has enough medication that he can do it if he wanted to, and that he may not make it through the weekend. A says, join with the family. I know that that is an initial intervention, but if you pay attention to the rest that follows, the rest is all incorrect. It also says, observe interactions in order to determine if Taylor should go to the emergency department. That is not how you determine if someone needs to go to the emergency department. You need to do a suicidal assessment, making A not the best answer. Part of A is correct, but the rest is wrong, given what we have presented to us in this question. C says, coach the family in positive communication strategies to reduce the suicidal ideation. That is not going to ethically and legally cover you in order to protect this client, making C incorrect. Ultimately, this is an ethical question that you should have been looking at and making sure that you was going to choose an answer that was going to protect that client and also protect your license. D says, encourage the family. Pay attention to answer responses that has you to encourage, especially when it comes to suicidal ideation. This family needs relief. They've been trying to make sure that this kid don't even kill themselves. But now you're going to encourage the family to take him to the emergency room. No, that's going to be incorrect. B says, instruct Taylor to go to the emergency department. It gets no more direct and immediate than the answer response B. Pay attention to the theory-specific questions that also have suicidal ideation tied into it. You cannot ignore you have to tie in both aspects of it. Even if this question would have been like, oh, join with the family, instruct Taylor to go to the emergency department. If that was the best answer out of the four, then hey, that probably would have been the right answer. But do not ignore that suicidal ideation has been mentioned if one of the best answers is going to be you protecting that client and ultimately protecting your license. I hope that makes sense. All right, everybody. I just wanted to do this one. This was a funny Halloween question that I did. But it's like a teaching moment as well. So a therapist is working with a client, the crypt keeper, who is a minor. The crypt keeper describes a detailed plan to bury a former friend who wronged him. So already here we have some homicidal ideation going on, right? The therapist believes that the threat is serious, imminent, and involves a grave danger of physical harm. And according to the Code of Ethics and legal mandates, the therapist has a duty to protect. What is the most appropriate initial step the therapist must take? This is your classic duty to warn, duty to protect question. I know I was talking to a few people regarding this question. I have a video for the duty to warn and duty to protect. I also did a story time regarding how the duty to warn and duty to protect came into effect in laws in the United States. Please check that video out. I can tag it into this description of this one if you really want to go in depth about how to answer the duty to warn and duty to protect questions. So A says, ask the client's parents to sign a release of information so the therapist can consult with a colleague. You don't have to do that, right? If you have enough evidence, you know it's a credible threat and you believe it's a credible threat, you don't need to do that. You make the call. You do what it is you need to do to protect that client, protect that other person, and then ultimately to protect your license, right? C says, Begin a no harm contact with the client and discuss alternative, less violent ways to resolve the conflict. Now, if that was one of the best answers out of the four, then hey, I would say like go for it. But I don't know if I can actually ever see an answer being like a no harm contract, especially if it's a credible threat and you have enough information to make the call. Go ahead and make the call. You don't need to make a contract, right? I think I skipped B. Why did I skip B? B says immediately contact the former friend. Oh yes. So this answer response here: immediately contact the former friend who is the victim, right, and warn them of the specific threats. The issue with B is that it's not enough protection, and the duty to warn and duty to protect, they go hand in hand with each other. You can't have one without the other. Sorry, that just came into my mind. I don't know, Married with Children when I said that. So you can't have one without the other, right? So we need to protect the public, which meaning we need to do D. Inform the client's parents, the legal guardians, contact the appropriate law enforcement agency or child protective services. Now I know it's a lot. It's a lot in D, but D is the only one that discusses the law enforcement, which ultimately mean we have the protection that we need in order to protect this person that has a detailed plan to bury the friend. We could have wronged him, right? So if he has a detailed plan, meaning it's thought out, they're ready to do it, it's a credible threat, we need to protect this person. So we are going to definitely have to get the law enforcement involved. I get it. I like doing these. I sometimes throw them in Google Gemini or Chat GPT because it's Halloween and I don't know, I like to make things light. Studying should be, you should be learning, but it also should be fun when you do so. So this wraps up this video of our questions of the week. Good job, everybody, on structural and strategic family therapy. By tomorrow night, we will know what we're going to be doing for the following week and if we're going to be able to meet. But yes, tomorrow night, we are going to do Kahoot for structural and strategic therapy. 30 to 50 questions. We are hitting the ground running with these questions. We need to be ready and prepared when it comes to the MFT national exam. Alrighty, everybody, I will talk to you soon.